Oi, oi, oi! It's your boy! Yokoso, your boy's back, as you can tell. I had a job that I had and, I had to leave it. They didn't even pay me in anything. Not even the so-called exposure that they always promise, but, I'll tell you all about that story later on in life. And today, we're going to mix together the two things people love the most: sex and Pokemon. Because as we all know, nothing bad has ever happened when you mix those two things together. Though there shouldn't be too much to worry about. After all, this is an educational channel where we do talk a lot about zoology. And today's educational topic is on the hitmons and why their reproduction makes no sense whatsoever. To understand why this is, we must first go over sex. Well, at least in the animal kingdom, seeing as the hitmons are based on animals, predominantly humans. I went over sex briefly in this video, so I'll try to keep it brief here as well. You see, in the animal kingdom, there are only two sexes, male and female, but how these sexes are used depend on the animal. Most animals reproduce sexually, and most of these animals are separated into one female and one male. Then you have hermaphrodites, which also reproduce sexually, but are either both male and female at the same time, like slugs, or will switch from one sex to the other, like the clownfish. Others have no sex at all and reproduce asexually, like the hydra. And then you have animals that are female only, like the New Mexico whiptail. And Pokemon are quite similar to animals when it comes to this, except instead of having hermaphrodites, Pokemon have male-only species. I'm gonna be real with you, a male-only species sounds fabulous. I mean, there'd be no thoughts, no feminists, and most importantly, nobody to get in your way when you want to go fishing with the boys. But sadly, such a world is impossible. And that's because a male-only species itself is impossible. And you can blame your gametes for that one. You see, in its most basic definition, a female is an organism with a larger gamete, while a male is the organism with a smaller gamete. Now, the larger gamete is able to go through a process known as Parthenogenesis, in which the egg becomes an embryo without the use of any sperm. There are many different strategies to Parthenogenesis, like automixis, in which the embryo will split chromosomes or fuse with a haploid cell. And then there's apomixis, which is when mitosis is used to make two diploid cells, which will have enough chromosomes to make an embryo. When it comes to Parthenogenesis, there are also many different strats, like RNOtoki, Thaleotoki, and Urotoki. This here is how females can reproduce without a mate, which means it is possible to live in a world with no fuckboys, no MRAs, and most importantly, nobody to stop you from going fishing with the girls. And as for sexless animals, they can just reproduce via budding, so they're fine too. The reason males can't reproduce asexually is because sperm can't develop into an embryo, nor can it split itself into a clone of its father. In fact, the closest thing to a male-only species I could find was the western carp gudgeon, which, according to this study here, does have male-only populations, but they do depend on other western carp gudgeon to reproduce. And guess what? These western carp gudgeon are female. Hey man, male animals, look on the bright side. At least you don't have to worry about your cum sock coming to life and saying,
Father, Father, I crave flesh, Father, 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 Father.
Yeah, none of that nightmare. But after hearing what I said, are you starting to see my issue with the hitmons and their reproduction? For most people, the most obvious answer would be Ditto, as it can breed with almost every Pokemon. In fact, in the Pokemon world, Ditto is the only way for the hitmons to reproduce, and it seems to work pretty well. Hell, they can even pass on egg moves by breeding with Ditto. But if it was that simple, I wouldn't have made this video. You see, Ditto is a factor when the hitmons are in human hands, but what about the ones that live in the wild? Because Tyrogue is found in the wild, even in parts that aren't near any human settlements. And to make things worse, and no games, anime, or manga do Ditto live anywhere near any of the hitmons. It's also important to know when the hitmons evolved, and I mean evolved in the natural selection sense, because if they evolved before Ditto, how did they breed? So while it might seem like a good answer at first, the Ditto answer just leads to more questions. It might be possible that the hitmons were artificially selected Pokemon and that they ended up escaping to the wild and surviving. This seems very plausible. I mean, after all, many domesticated animals end up being released and can end up surviving, like feral dogs. But this does raise a few questions, like are the hitmons a result of artificial selection being used on a different species of Pokemon, or are the hitmons the same now as they were before domestication? If it's the former, did they just breed the males with the Ditto only? Like, why go through all that work when the females are right there? As a matter of fact, you could just make the females as powerful as the males with artificial selection as well. And did they even have Ditto around the time they domesticated these things? How do we know that Ditto didn't evolve afterwards, or that the theory that Ditto is a failed Mew clone was right all along? So let's be real. Breeding male and female hitmons would have been a lot easier than breeding the males with Dittos only to get a male-only species. And also, whose bright idea was it to let these things roam out in the wild if they are artificially selected? Doesn't that fuck with the ecosystem? And here's the thing, it wouldn't work out anyway, because either A, the hitmons would destroy the ecosystem and everything would die out, including them. Remember, they can't reproduce at all, they're all male. Or B, the second they get into the wild, they'll die out immediately and you can't find them there. And the worst part is, people would have went through all this effort to breed a male-only Pokemon just to throw it back into the wild. Look, guys, I get it, they've never been an OU, but you just don't throw away your Pokemon like that, dog. I know some people are now thinking about that Sinnoh poem, the one about how Pokemon and people used to get married. It's a myth, dog. And even if humans and Pokemon were able to reproduce, who, I'm asking, who would want to sleep with a hitmon? White women. White women would, but let's be real, they would rather help the Arcanine population. If we're going to be real, white women on Twitter wouldn't stop talking about how fire Arcanine dick is. No magic. Not once in the Pokemon lore does it indicate that the hitmons were just zapped into existence. Unless Pokemon creationism was real this whole time. So every answer I could think of to how the hitmons reproduce just lead to more questions than answers. They don't answer anything. And this issue is relevant for many of the male-only Pokemon. Tauros, the MMA Muppets, the American Eagle Bird with the not-so-subtle Japanese name, all of them fall into the same issue. The only ones that seem to be able to get away with being a male-only species are the Nido male line, Glade, Voltbeat, Latios, and... the fuck was this thing's name again? You know what? It doesn't matter. What matters is these guys can reproduce with their female counterparts and make more of themselves. But that's only if there's only one of each of them. If not, then the problem applies to them too. But I am retarded, so maybe you have an answer that doesn't falter under basic logic. If so, let me know down in the comments below. Also, do you think Pokemon can use Parthenogenesis? Let's say if you left the female Charizard all by herself, and she reproduced asexually in order to restore the Charizard population. Let me know that in the comments down below as well. Alright, I'll see y'all boys later. But I am retarded, so maybe you have an answer that doesn't falter under...